Welcome and thank you for joining us for this webinar presentation. We are the Homeland Defense and Security Information Analysis Center, or HDIAC, one of 3 IAC domains in the DoD Information Analysis Centers operating under the Defense Technical Information Center, DTIC, within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. Our informative webinar series highlights current and emerging research and technology developments. It presents an opportunity for accelerating the DoD's leverage of these advancements by increasing awareness and fostering technical collaboration. HDIAC serves as one of the premier information research partners and curators of technology advancements and trends for the Homeland Defense and Security community. As such, our organization supports those working in the Homeland Defense and Security domain of DoD research and engineering. We do so by helping navigate the vast landscape of scientific and technical information, allowing our customers to get a head start on their technical projects. With an understanding of the Homeland Defense and Security DoD research and engineering landscape, we provide research and analysis services. We help unlock access to information, knowledge, and best practices from government, industry, and academia to stimulate innovation, foster collaboration, and eliminate redundancy. We hope you enjoy this webinar presentation and that it serves as a catalyst for community collaboration and improved DoD Homeland Defense and Security research.
All right, good day, everyone. My name is John Clements, and I'm the technical lead for the Homeland Defense Security Information Analysis Center, or HDIAC, and welcome to part 1 of HDIAC's Brain Health mini-series. We're presenting this mini-series in addition to our regular monthly webinars. The goal here is to highlight the tremendous amount of research into the health of the brain, the most complex organ in the body. Decades of research by thousands of people worldwide has led to an increased understanding of how the brain functions and how it impacts our operation when it is injured. However, with each answer, it kind of seems that multiple new questions arise. So it's definitely worth the time to study and learn more and more as more and more research is conducted. So part 1 of the mini-series starts in the beginning, discussing the SABRES program, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. Part 2 is on May 14th, which will explore the mental health of soldiers and their families who have not deployed and may suffer from a sort of a type of survivor's guilt. May's Mental Health Awareness Month, and this will examine a longitudinal study done with hundreds of soldiers and their spouses, and it's very interesting. On June 14th, we welcome back Drs. Baer and Starnes, who are today's webinar presenters, who I will introduce in a moment, and they'll discuss neurofeedback, or NFB, and methods to modify brainwave activity to the benefit of the warfighter. And finally, on July 17th, we examined methods for using cognitive and ocular motor functions to assess service members who have suffered a traumatic brain injury. If one of those dates don't work, you can always catch them on our YouTube channel, and the slide presentations will be posted to the HDIAC website with the webinar announcement once they are ready, including today's, which I put the link to get to the slide presentation in the chat. It's the same link you probably went to register for the webinar, but now you'll see a button at the bottom that says to download the presentation. Should be live up there. With that, just a couple of admin notes real quick. There is a Q&A function in WebEx. There's a 3-dot ellipses menu down in the very bottom right of your screen. Best way to get your question answered is to go in there and click on the Q&A tab and type your question in there, and I will hold all the questions until the end, and I'll ask the presenters at the end of the presentation. All attendees, are muted, but you do have the ability to chat with each other or send direct chats to certain people if you want to. And as I said, the presentation, the video should be up on our YouTube channel shortly after, probably by the end of today, if not by early next week. And with that, I'd like to introduce our 2 webinar presenters. First, we have Dr. Amy Baer from Marine Forces Special Operations Command. She is a trusted leader in performance psychology, advanced biofeedback, and applied psychophysiology practices. Her experience spans 25 years designing and implementing performance training programs for elite caliber athletes, active duty service members, and combat war veterans. Her background combines knowledge with practical applications to develop comprehensive strategies associated with productive learning, performance, and achievement. She is well versed on peak performance principles, intervention techniques, and biofeedback and neuroscience technologies utilized to increase awareness and exercise control over psychophysiological responses to high pressure situations. She's board certified in biofeedback and is a mentor for the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance. Dr. Baer holds a PhD in educational psychology. We also have Dr. Kat Starnes from MARSOC as well. She is an applied biostatistician providing guidance on program design and assessment in support of cross-domain holistic care and performance enhancement and analytical support for assessing the longitudinal impact of performance training programs for active duty service members. She has more than 10 years of experience providing support and guidance as a statistics professor and statistician in academic consulting labs and tactical spaces. She has worked as a pharmacy tech and medical assistant. Her professional interests and experiences include injury prevention and rehabilitation, sports medicine, perinatal health, cross-domain collaboration, holistic care, performance enhancements, experimental design, longitudinal data analysis, and observational data. Ms. Starnes holds a PhD in epidemiology and biostatistics. And with that, I will turn it over to Drs. Baer and Starnes.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having us and hosting us here today. I pulled up my PowerPoint. Can everyone see my opening slide here, my title slide?
Yes, I can.
And you can see when I advance?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to jump right in. We are always passionate and love to share what we're doing at MARSOC. This has been an exciting pilot program that is now a program of record that we want to share the love across what we're doing and also get great feedback. This is a wonderful platform for us to hear from you as far as what we're doing, how we can make it better, what our next steps will be. So we're going to give you the background overview and some ideas as far as where we think we're heading and some exploratory analysis of what we've already discovered. And then we look forward to the Q&A to give you better insight into and ideas from the audience about what else we could include to evolve what we're doing here. So where do we come from? Obviously, everyone would think of the Warfighter Brain Health Initiative, and that's definitely a big focus of in caring for our service members, but also POTIF, Preservation of the Force and Family, which was originally 4 domains. In 2020, established a 5th domain looking at cognitive performance. So with that double dose of focus on brain health and taking care of our service members, that's where SABRES was born out of. And SABRES stands for Special Operations Assessment Baselining Readiness Evaluation System. Say that 3 times fast. And is essentially a program that's utilizing a whole host of information. We're attacking it on various fronts in regards to measures of cognitive performance, measures of brain physiology, and subjective assessments as far as cognition, recovery, and well-being. And our mission was pretty straightforward. When we took this on, they said, figure out the best systems using the right test, give us meaningful data to understand and support brain work, and something that we can do about it. It's pretty easy, right? That's a easy task and one to take on, but that's where we're coming from. And our driving force has really been actionable data. It's great to have numbers. It's great to put metrics to it, but we wanted meaningful metrics. We wanted to make sure that it was moving it forward for the service member and really targeting their goals of their brain health and performance. So let me give you a little bit more of a breakdown of what makes up SABRES and our various components. Attacking on multiple fronts, we start in the very beginning, and that's our subjective information. Getting that big picture view of what the service member is currently doing to help or hinder their brain. So we're taking a history of their TBI and head events, diagnosed and undiagnosed. So they might not have it in their medical records, but we kind of dig a little deeper and ask about things that they might not have reported, growing up playing contact sports, a lot of flashbangs in training, hard landings and airborne, all these little ways that could be impacting their brain. Looking at their various lifestyle factors in regards to nutrition, relationships, sleep, general health and well-being, symptomology, what are they noticing and picking up on, deployment readiness, and even finances. We all know a tax season coming. That's a big headache and can stress anyone out and hurt our brains. From there, we put them through a good brain workout, and we use CNS vital signs as our neurocognitive assessment. And this really allows us to capture that whole brain in action, looking at their cognitive abilities on a variety of tasks, capturing reaction time, processing speed, verbal and working memory, executive function, cognitive flexibility, and attention. So that gives us a nice working dashboard as far as their performance outputs. But really what makes SABRES special is when we look under the hood and we use the EEG measures, because the brain is savvy and they're getting the job done and getting it done well. But it's, how's the brain compensating? How are they lacking efficiency, or they're trying harder, having to prioritize their performance efforts to make up for some of these vulnerabilities. So using the EEG system, we're able to do some brain mapping of the electrical activity. We use a 19 site channel measuring 2 to 30 hertz of electrical activity, as well as capturing event-related potentials and an additional test of reaction time, basically a go, no-go task while they're capped up. And what this does is it really allows us to see how their brain is wired, what is their firing power supporting that, and how this may be helping or hurting what they're trying to do. So it really allows us to discover those vulnerabilities, determine their attentional style, and we'll talk more about that later. Breaking down their information processing system to learn where there might be delays occurring. Using the head maps to start illustrating some of these activation levels that are outside the norms, either too much of a good thing or deficits. Certainly this is going to give us some ideas of impact of sleep and stress. Potentially discover focus struggles with an overactive theta brainwave. We are able to see kind of that brain fog that they might be experiencing, or that overthinking and rumination that's happening, and even challenges that might be related to memory and processing that pops up here. So lots of information that we pull together, and then what do we do with it? We have a conversation with them. And as I said, we want it to be actionable data. We're not just collecting and squirreling this away and it's going in some deep box in the middle of nowhere, but we're sitting down with the service member very transparently, and we're rolling all this information back to them. So we're connecting those dots. We're confirming what they're seeing and experiencing and may have brought up in their subjective answers. Also reassuring them, I think, is a big thing. Is it might not be anything new, but maybe that confirmation of those symptomologies, and then this is what really motivates them. Hey, wow, yeah, I knew kind of my stress is pretty high here, and yeah, I'm not sleeping so great, but this is what it's doing to my brain. Man, I need to do something about this. And it really kind of motivates them to take action, really that tipping point, to be able to see it in full color, and to put some numbers behind it to really, get them motivated to do something about it. So what this does is obviously, puts out a tremendous amount of data. And this has been a blessing and a curse for our data scientist team. We have thrown hundreds of thousands of points to them. And this really allows us to kind of discuss what happens to the metrics and why it matters. And that's why I have Dr. Kat Starnes on the call here to take you through where do we go from here, and where does this information build us some great leadways moving forward with brain health. So I'm going to turn it over to Kat.
Thanks, Amy. So as mentioned on the previous slide, the data that is collected from the SABRES assessment gets used in a variety of ways. At the individual level, the information is taken and triangulated, It's collated and used to help inform individual operators, individual service members about what's going on with them at that particular point in time. Now, that in and of itself has some pretty significant value, but we also have a tremendous amount of information now that we can use to look for an overarching picture. So at a more aggregate or population level, what we're looking for is try to identify if we see any patterns. So do we see maybe particular phenotypes amongst our operators, or do we see that there are common deficits, common experiences, things that are maybe at higher levels or lower levels in our population as compared to the general population? We also are working to build out MARSOC population norms so that we can assess whether something is normal or abnormal and provide some feedback to our folks about that within our population. So there are a few particular concerns, challenges, things to keep in mind when working with this much information. One thing that we've found as we've been working on this is that the buildup of an adequate sample size to really look at the breadth of information has taken some time. You have a huge number of data points per individual, but in order to look at those kind of comprehensively, it takes quite a few people to be able to balance that out. One thing that we found really interesting, though, is that the early exploratory analyses that we did when we had much smaller sample sizes have been pretty stable in terms of the types of patterns that we see, where we thought we saw phenotypes early on. As we get larger sample sizes, those phenotypes appear to be continuing to be identifiable. So that has been a really cool thing to observe, that you don't always get that, I guess, is where I was going with that particular statement. A lot of times you get some funky stuff with small sample sizes and early exploratory analyses, and we have not seen that with this. It's been very consistent. Amy, if you want to go on to the next slide for me, please. Awesome sauce. So we've got two primary lines of effort. One is assessment, the other is performance enhancement. So with the assessment line of effort, what we're really trying to do is build out those descriptives, build out those population norms, baseline-ish our people. So I think Amy mentioned this earlier. We can't build out a true baseline for our folks. For one, before they ever come to the military, they've had a life. Many of them were active, whether that's something like high school sports, or whether they were rock climbers, or whether they were, I don't know, driving fast cars. They all had a life before they came to the military, many of them with potential brain health impacting exposures. but also by the time they make it to us at MARSOC, they already have a military career. The Marine Corps Special Operations doesn't have a street to fleet option. They have to have served as a Marine for several years before they're eligible to come to MARSOC. So there's military exposures as well as any previous life exposures that these guys have. But we can attempt to create a new to MARSOC baseline. That's the initial goal of the assessments. And then we have periodic reassessments or assessments if they're indicated based off of what our folks are reporting to providers in a variety of different areas. The use of the data from those assessments then at the population level, in addition to establishing the norms, we also use to inform our other motive arms in terms of what are common things that we're seeing. So two really common sets of issues that we see and hear reported are that there are very high levels of stress and that our folks are having sleep issues. Those are pretty generic, pretty broad things to be challenged with. But we get confirmation that those are not just, I guess, not just perceived issues, but that there are actually impacts of those going on via SABRES. That can then be used to help develop programming in some of the other areas so that you get a holistic approach to trying to address some of those issues. Sometimes what you see is even smaller and more specific than that, and those can make for even more pointed interventions. The other arm that we have is the performance enhancement arm. So we'll really touch more on the performance enhancement arm the next webinar that Dr. Bear and I are able to speak at. But in addition to kind of checking where people are and being able to address any deficits, whether that's actually being able to improve those or whether it's helping people to learn how to cope with them, we also have a desire to take people who are already strong performers and to help them be better. And so that's the goal of that performance enhancement arm. From our SABRES assessments, which are a requirement for either arm, then our operators work with our CEPs, which are our cognitive enhancement providers, to develop a training plan, potentially at SABRES doing neurofeedback, potentially with one of our cognitive performance specialists doing other exercises, doing other programming, or potentially with other POTIF providers, whether that be someone in mental health or sports medicine or strength and conditioning, nutrition. There's a whole host of different areas that people can be referred to depending on the needs that are identified, the goals that are identified, and kind of the underlying causes for what people are looking to work on. So I think that was everything I wanted to say on this slide. Amy, we can go on to the next one. All right. Here we have a snapshot of our population demographics. And this slide is actually about 9 months old. We have over 1,100 SABRES assessments now. One of the, I guess I mentioned this earlier, we have a lot of consistency between what's on this slide and what we're seeing with our larger sample. Most of our folks are around age 30, but you can see that we have a pretty wide range of ages. Most of the folks who are coming through SABRES are either operators, that's our CSOs and SUs, or their support personnel. We see primarily NCOs and staff NCOs, so that's our enlisted folks between E4 and E9. We have some officers and a very small handful of warrant officers. That being said, that pretty accurately reflects the overall population demographics for MARSOC, so we don't see any huge deviations in who's coming to SABRES from the MARSOC population at large. MARSOC service members are extremely heavily male, which is reflected in these SABRES population demographics. And the years in service is also pretty consistent, again, with what we see at the population levels. Our two primary reasons for assessments are either that people are coming through for their baseline or for one of their regular reassessments, or they've had a provider, again, in another POTIF area, recommend that they come through for assessment. On occasion, you'll also see someone who was referred by their medical chain of command who works really closely with POTIF. So we have a lot of referrals between POTIF and medical in both directions. As I mentioned before, sleep and stress are two of our greatest areas of concern. They're the most common reasons that people come looking for help. But we also see a fair number of people who are struggling with memory or processing, who feel like they're struggling with attention, and then a much smaller number who have things that are kind of a generic residual concussive effect, or who maybe feel like they're struggling with overactive thoughts. Their brain is just kind of running wild with them. I want to make a note that these areas are definitely not mutually exclusive, and definitely can kind of feed into one another. We find then the next thing that we are going to be looking at is our cognitive phenotypes. We've developed these using a combination of analytics and observation. And I want to just take a pause for a second and talk about a couple of the challenges in developing the phenotypes from an analytics perspective. One is it's a tremendous number of measurements on each individual, and trying to wade through those and figure out which ones are relevant, which ones are which ones maybe are correlated with one another. It's a large task. One of the appealing ways to deal with that is to try to employ something like an exploratory factor analysis, or to use something like a hierarchical cluster analysis to see, just kind of see what's there. Can we use analytical techniques to either group people together into similar phenotypes, or can we take all of this information that we have and find more common constructs amongst those variables from the factor analysis perspective. One of the really big challenges with this is that we find that we end up with data that is missing not at random. I don't know how many of you are familiar with dealing with missing data, but data that has some randomness to its missing pattern, it is relatively straightforward to deal with. You can use several different imputation techniques to be able to continue to work with it. But data that's missing not at random is a much different beast to work with. I'm going to ask Amy to tag in for just a second to talk about the specific not at random pattern that we see, which is that we have, for some of our EEG measures in particular, data that is coded as indiscernible.
Yeah. So the way, for those familiar with EEG and QEEG, is taking the squiggly lines and that raw data of brainwave activity and translating it into metrics, trying to put numbers to it into a QEEG, quantitative EEG form. And although the computers are super sophisticated and do an excellent job of doing that versus back in the day having to eyeball it and hand jam and interpret what we're seeing with those squiggly lines, there are opportunities that Kat alluded to where the computer just throws its hands up and says, I don't know, your guess is as good as mine, and labels certain categories in particular as indiscernible. Usually that's a bad sign. So that's looking at something more along the lines of peak alpha frequency, which we'll talk about, that brain's idle speed. If that's coming back indiscernible, they were probably falling asleep or asleep during the data capture. Things with indiscernible, looking at ERPs, event-related potentials, and information processing delays. Basically, that signal is coming through so indistinctively that, again, it just has those multiple points. And, you know, this is where, as a practitioner, it's an art and a science for me to sit down with all this information. I get a whole thick file to review, but there is some savviness to it to be able to truly eyeball the raw data, to look at these you know, random acts of missing data and how they connect to that bigger picture. But for Kat, it's a much greater challenge that can sometimes be insurmountable, because now it's leaving big pockets that she doesn't want to leave empty. She doesn't want to put a zero number to it, but are certainly key information that we want to capture in some ways. So that's what, you know, Kat was referring to there. So I'll kick it back to you, Kat.
I think we're actually ready for the next slide.
All right. So getting into that cognitive phenotype, as I said, as a practitioner, it's wonderful to sit down one-on-one and paint this picture for each individual. It's been fantastic for Kat to you know, really have the harder task of giving us that larger picture view on a greater level. What does our population look like? Where are some of these vulnerabilities falling out? And how can we keep those group trends in mind as we're going? But let me kind of walk you through some of the things that we're starting to see here. We keep talking about sleep and stress, and I don't want to make it a magic wand, but at the same time, I regularly have the conversation of this is a needle mover. And if we can just get those two variables in a better place, it's going to definitely shift you into at least within a norm range versus falling outside and on that really bad day that they're super stressed out and not sleeping, really exposing a lot of those cognitive performance variabilities that they're struggling with. And the three common areas that we see fall out with this are reaction time. They're just not as quick and as sharp as they want to be, or they think that they could be. And then that higher order thinking with executive function and cognitive flexibility, their brain saying, hey, I just want to keep you alive today. And that, higher order thinking is definitely going to be a bigger struggle for me in regards to that. Now, you take this information and you pair it with a MARSOC mentality of do it right the first time, and valuing speed over accuracy, or valuing high accuracy over speed and sacrificing that, excuse me, got it backwards, then we really see that struggle, because we're already seeing a slower reaction time, looking on a grander group trend, and now we're layering in that sleep and stress, and it's really creating some issues and things to worry about. We also see increased omission errors, so they miss details and opportunities to respond as well in connection to this. The theta beta brainwave ratio. This is always a fun conversation to talk about attentional style. So your theta brainwaves give you that broad situational awareness, which operators love, right? They're able to walk into a situation in a room and they can tell you minute details in a big picture perspective of everything that's going on around them. Beta brainwaves give you your focal power. So they're what dial that brain in and say, pay attention here, focus on this task, catch this action happening for them. And unfortunately, what happens is that ratio, as they should work together, can get a little skewed. And as a blessing, having that broad situational awareness is great for our operators, and that can really be one of their superpowers. But then we got to make sure that that focal power is still being emphasized and prioritized, because those darn thetas, they're going to go to what's interesting and what's unique and what's different, and that may be what they should be paying attention to, or maybe that distractor as well for them. So helping them understand what that attentional style, where their brain is taking them, and then giving them a way and strategies to be able to keep that in better check for them. The next bullet point, looking at ERP. So we're capturing this in that go, no-go task, and we can really look at their information processing center. And when we're looking where seconds matter, and you're seeing potentially on average as much as 132 millisecond delay, that's very costly. So this is definitely something that we want to pay attention to. Certainly we want to be prepared for, and certainly we want to up the game on. And then research is showing more and more ties of this as potential indicators of TBI and concussion as this is falling off. So this is where we can pass this on to the MOs and having those conversations about, is something going on? Is that delay that bigger brain health issue that we need to be addressing sooner rather than later? Looking at heart rate variability is, again, another great way to look at the physiology system and what is their fight or flight response with their autonomic nervous system. We do see typically a balanced low frequency, which is what you're going after, but there is some strong bimodal effects. And by what I mean by that is we see that high sympathetic dominance, that high activation, which is that go hard charger, 0 to 100 Mach 5 with their hair on fire, that's made them successful as a raider. And then that parasympathetic dominance, that lack of rest and recovery, and that warning sign on their body saying, just please slow down, take a break, and help us get through that. So that bimodal effects, having really rich conversations, discussing what are your stress management techniques? What are your coping strategies? Are they effective coping strategies and positive ones versus negative things that they could be doing to deal with that overactivation? What's their norm versus what's normal? Because they don't even realize that high activation. That's just a typical day at MARSOC. And when you're able to really allow them to experience feeling more balanced, feeling more centered and grounded, wow, that's a huge change for them, and then is going to help them be more effective with their energy resources. They're endurance athletes. They need to be able to keep that tank as fuel as high as possible and to sustain that for as long as they can. So if they can fine tune that activation and be able to kind of dial it back when they get those few opportunities and not always have the option of either 0 or 100, that's going to keep them in the mission for the long haul. And then the last point is alluding to our peak alpha frequency mean, which is in a optimal performance range. So that's good to see. This is again something that we're going to be looking at more in our longitudinal studies, because it might just be syncing up with that speed versus accuracy and wanting to kind of keep things in check there. This can also start alluding, as we're monitoring this, if that's starting to fall off, is this some early warning signs of cognitive deficits, and where their processor is just not being able to intake that information as effectively as it used to. This is going to start creating issues with cognitive overload, and being able to keep up with that high pressure, high paced operational environment that they're working in. So having those conversations, have you always been where we're reading you at? Is this one of those things that is a decline for you, and you start noticing those differences? So this is just highlighting some of the things that are starting to come out as we're looking on that broad base picture that Kat's been amazing at putting together for us. What do we do with this information? As I said, actionable. So we circle back with the service member and we say, now that we've learned all this stuff, now that we've confirmed what's happening, what can we do about it? And one of the things in our SABRES shop is that neurofeedback piece. So this is my little teaser to come back in June and hear us talk more directly about that. Certainly gives us that opportunity to really attack that root cause of that brainwave activity. If we can clean and regulate that up, then it's just going to be that domino effect to their overall performance output. Pairing that with biofeedback and the physiological response is certainly going to optimize that mind-body connection. Having a cognitive training plan. So now that we can really start pinpointing and targeting exactly what you do well and where are those opportunities for improvement, how can we start building and adding additional tools to your toolbox? How can we sharpen those tools that you have to take your game to the next level? All these are important things that we want to have them learn, we want to have them test and develop, and we want to be able to tie that in to their skill base, and task specific, which helps us with our performance coaching. We're really fortunate at MARSOC to be able to have a embedded cognitive performance specialist. So they are right there, based within the battalions, seeing things firsthand, observing training, and being able to bring a lot of this stuff to light and help support some of the things that we're doing as far as education and resources for that. And then, as I said, that's going back to that sleep hygiene and fatigue management. Is it just changing things and giving them those nuggets of information of appropriate routines? Is this alluding to the value of a sleep study and seeing if there's, a more of a medical connection to what's going on there? So ultimately, what does all this, contribute to? First off, besides just getting a lot of like, oh, that's why I do what I do, as they're having these aha moments and us explaining this data to them, now they can really take action and optimize where they're coming from. So if you think about kind of that prevention and protection aspect of what we're doing here, certainly we're able to catch things faster. Our monitoring systems, we have some pipelines where we're trying to capture them as early as we can. They're on a 3-year cycle to revisit us, certainly coming back sooner rather than later if there is a significant issue that arises or an event that occurs. Our EOD population comes in every 6 months because we know that they're at that high risk and they have a ton of blast exposure, and we want to capture things going awry for them. And really that more targeted information helps us get to the root of the problem. So now that we can say, here's where you were, here's where you are now, we can see where those things are definitely falling off. It gives us great information to be able to put together a more comprehensive and effective training plan. It's also helpful for our other providers. So we're just kind of that hub, and then we're passing this information on to our sites to help develop coping strategies, to the MOs to figure out any of the medical interventions that may be appropriate, to other providers that are helping them deal with different stressors or things that are going on. Highlighting nutrition and making sure they're fueling their body and just catching little ways that they can make some big changes and what's happening. So ultimately with, our program, we are designed for cognitive performance enhancement. And I really want to stress that we're not there to be able to, pull the warfighter from the line or diagnose or treat medical disorders. Those aren't the conversations we're having. So it's creating that safe space for them to start speaking up. They don't want their career to end. They don't want to suddenly not do the things that they've been trained to do, but they're definitely looking and noticing when things are going awry, and we're creating that safe space for them to bring those ideas to us, to start telling them when things aren't going well, that there's a place to work on that. And there's a lot of great training plans and things that we can do to help them. So this isn't a can that they're kicking 9 or 10 years down the road and then they've really dug a deep hole. So we're really, changing the culture for them to seek that care sooner, to realize what an impact that it can be having negatively, and motivating them to do it. So really, looking at SOCOM and all of us, I'm sure on this call will agree that preserving our force is our highest priority for the command. It's all about the human factor. So it's essential for us to continue to have these conversations, to be innovative, to find valuable solutions that are really aimed at well-being and performance, right? We make them a better person. That's naturally going to help improve their performance and enhance their career over a longer time. And we're just excited that we found the SABRES program is allowing us to do both and making that happen. So looking at the time, I want to definitely, I've seen different questions pop back up here, and I want to make sure that we circle back and get those. So I'm going to turn things back over to John, and he can take us through some of the things that we can fill in for you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Drs. Baer and Starn. So I'll kick right into the questions. First question that came in that I saw, it says, have you found undiagnosed issues like ADHD, et cetera? If so, is there a difference in the impact of TBI?
Great question. So again, we know enough to be dangerous. We will definitely uncover several indicators relating to ADHD. We're not there to diagnose it, but we're able to say, hey, we're seeing this happening in these various performance areas. Why don't you go to the psychs to get tested? Why don't you follow up and see if this is a legitimate issue or not? Because that's really what it is we're hopefully highlighting what may be happening, but then we're that connector and that handoff to the experts to do what they do best. And to confirm that information for them and follow up appropriately.
Next question. While EEG isn't the most precise tool for pinpointing specific brain structure, can you explain how traumatic experiences can affect the brain structures involved in emotion processing, like the amygdala? Also, are there emerging treatments that show promise in helping service members recover from PTSD?
Great question. So here is my thoughts on that. EEG is a great way to give you a cheaper assessment of that brainwave activity. Certainly, you have those extensive MRIs and CAT scans and ways to look at the structural and blood flow. Very expensive, high-level equipment, high-level professionals doing that. The EEG, we're certified in what we're doing, and it's definitely it's our own little niche. It pairs with what you could see on those higher levels, but it provides and I'll do air quotes, cheaper alternative to get to that information. Again, enough to know that there's something worth here following up information. So if you think of us almost as like a screener of hey, we're picking up on some things here with the brainwave activity. And like you talked about, that emotional processing, that sits right there on the frontal lobe, right-hand side. Well, think about what is people's typical responses to blast exposure to turn that shoulder to the right side and take that strong hit. Your sensory motor strip sits right across central across the head. All that overpressure under the helmets is definitely, highlighting and centralizing over that sensory motor strip. Now we're seeing issues with coordination and balance and heightened sensitivity and things like that. So again, I really want to emphasize we're not here to diagnose. We're here to start pointing in the right direction. They pair our SABRES data with the packaging to the Intrepid Spirit, which is the Center for TBI and Concussion Recovery. So again, it then allows them to get a jump start on what is that comprehensive training plan, to then highlight and effectively use their resources in relation to what we do. So we're just that first, foot in the door to get them moving in the right direction, to again seek those professionals or seek that help of those who are the experts in what the care they need.
Oh, great, thank you. So the next question, is there any chance that assessment might be conducted upon Marine Corps initial entry before Marine Corps initial training?
We would love it. It takes a lot. If you think about, so we didn't talk about our staff setup. We're a small team of, I believe there's 6 of us now on staff. And if you think about this process, we're talking about a 2-hour baseline, with information that, that assessment portion of gathering, then that follow up to build that file to then pass on to the cognitive enhancement practitioner to then hand interpret and connect that information and then have that hour follow up. So it's very time intensive equipment that you need. Again, that price tag that goes with it. You'll be first one to say it is worth every penny that's put in, but you start trying to scale that up. That is where some of the challenges, unfortunately, have been as they've tried to roll out this program across the enterprise. MARSOC is small and mighty, and we're able to get the job done effectively for our population. You think about going to USASOC and big army, and you're going to have to multiply what we do by 100 or 1,000. And it just is to hit those masses. You're going to have to really expand things out. I think it's doable and I think it's worth the investment, but those are going to be some of the challenges moving forward to make this happen.
Thank you. So next question, has the SABRE program been considered for rated and non-rated Marine Corps aviators, or has this program been presented to NAVAIR to implement? Yes.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the previous question of the information is out there, and we will help anyone and everyone who's interested in getting this up and running for their shop and their population. We've had, onesies and twosies that come in and check things out. So definitely, if you have a connection and an interest in doing that, certainly reach out to us and we will share all of our lessons learned. I think the pilot really took a good solid 2.5 years to really, tighten things up and get us where we are. We can save you that time and say, hey, here's where we're at, pass the baton to you and make it work for your group as needed. So happy to have those conversations and mentor you in making that happen.
Great, so probably time for a few more questions. Easy one here. What specific EEG device are you using?
So our current system for assessment is the EVOKE system. It's by EVOKE Neuroscience, if you want to Google and check that out. They evaluated various systems in the pilot, and for ease of use as well as ease of reporting, and then some of the particular metrics that EVOKE reporting provides us without getting too much into the weeds of system capabilities, it was the best fit for the program because we can turn around reports very quickly. We get a lot of good metrics from it that the other ones weren't readily able to apply or supply for us. There's a variety of systems out there. You can figure out which one works for you, and there's other people using EEG with different systems as well to get the job done effectively. So I think it's a matter of looking at your data and what you want to capture and what system provides that effectively for you.
All right. So this question, I guess, is in reference to something specific that you presented. So it says overactive brain, 18%. That seems like quite a large number. Is this also related with sleep disorder?
Absolutely, right? You're sitting there laying, ruminating about your day and what's to come, and can't shut that brain off. That can definitely impair that sleep, and provide those issues for them. So that's where I think that comprehensive layering, we're able to do what we can to slow that brainwave activity, kind of squash that overactivation, get it into a more normative range, pairing that with what are they, maybe they're working with a psych to talk about the core, what are those things that they're overthinking about, or over analyzing, and providing those strategies, and then certainly the mo checking out to make sure that there's not some misfiring due to some other issues going on. So I think that's the beauty of SABRES, is that coordinated care, to look at it with our own lens and scope, and then work collaboratively on a multiple layer attack to get at the source of the problem and be more effective at finding a solution.
Okay, next question. When you look at theta beta EEG ratios, is this recording resting state EEG?
Yes, it's captured during a 5 minutes eyes open, 5 minutes eyes closed reading. So for those of you those out there that know what I'm talking about, so the recording is done sitting in the office, and under those two states, to give you that information.
Perfect. And then when you analyze EEG data, are you using univariate or multivariate analysis?
I'm going to kick this to Kat.
Well, both. So descriptives are univariate, and then we're looking at a variety of multivariate techniques to give us the most comprehensive picture that we can. I want to be really clear here at this point. These analyses are exploratory. And so, yes, both multivariate, because obviously it would be a mistake to try to, I think, only employ a univariate approach when clearly there's a relationship between the variables that are collected on a single person. Definitely want to account for that in our analysis.
Okay. I think I have time for maybe these two more questions, and I apologize for anybody whose questions I don't get to. But Dr. Starnes' email addresses are up on the screens, and of course, if you want to get in touch with them and didn't write those down, you can always reach HDIAC at contact@hdiac.org. That's HDIAC.org. But so for this penultimate question, when are you getting HRV in the evaluation? From the intro slide, talks about the survey, CNS vital signs, and the EEG.
Good question. So that is taken during the EEG portion of that 5 minutes eyes open, 5 minutes eyes closed. It's using an ECG read on it. So that's a chest read for capturing that variability.
Great. And then last question, I think we'll have time for your objective assessments. Have you considered using PLR as a protocol, PLR being pupillary light reaction?
I know there's a lot of great studies out there looking at eye tracking, and that's a hot topic out there. I'm not familiar with it. Certainly, it could be a great addition to add one more layer of information of what's going on there. So I know that there's some good work and research in that area, and I'd love to hear more about it and collaborate on how that would connect the dots with some of the stuff we're already gathering.
All right, great. And with that, it brings us exactly at 1 p.m. Again, if I didn't get to your question, I do apologize, but you can reach out to Drs. Baer and Starnes or to myself. And certainly, if you were interested in what you just heard, the presentation is up on our website. I put the link in the chat, but you can go to hdioc.org/webinars and find today's webinar, download the presentation. And no later than early next week, the recording of the video should be up on our YouTube channel. So please check that out if you need, if you want to revisit it or share it out with anybody. And with that, Doctors Bear and Starnes, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and all the time you put into getting this put together for us.
Our pleasure. Please reach out and let us know what you guys are doing as well. And then tune back in June to hear more about our neurofeedback. Shameless plug, but we'll definitely give you some better insight of how we apply this information and what we're doing to move that needle.
All right. Thank you and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks for having us.